If I was you, I'd be asking for a refund. Everything they do for DOC, they need to defund. Lazy guards, double cells, everything in here is hell. You ever been to the county jail praying that you get some mail? Then you hit receive and all the stories, can't believe them. I thank God that I'm alive, I thank God that I'm still breathing. After COVID, wearing masks, everyone's sad. How did a virus know a budget? It really makes me laugh. We had good times, bad times, but still it made us strong. It was hard to be accountable, I had to right my wrongs. But now I'm long and forgotten, they forgot about me.
Welcome to another compelling episode of the Defund DOC podcast, your number one premium community to hear true prison stories, conniving prison politics, and radical prison reform solutions that will end recidivist crime in America once and for all. Please welcome our hosts, Linda Thompson and Daniel J. Sims, as they delve into another hard-hitting and thought-provoking episode.
We have Victor Gonzalez on with us today. Welcome to the podcast. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your childhood, and your incarceration?
Yes, ma'am. I'll start at my childhood. Yeah, I had a pretty rough upbringing. I was raised in a Christian home. My parents were obsessed with Christianity, so it was a really stringent home. My brother passed away when I was about 8. He was 10. And I want to say that was about the first time I ever experienced true loss. And it was the first time I want to say I ever entertained the concept of hate, you know. There was a lot of trauma in my childhood, like the age of 6 or 7, I believe it was. A lot of situations, like my dad was super abusive. He was the type of guy to go to church on Sunday and beat my mom as soon as he'd come back, you know. Get drunk or whatnot. There was a few times I remember first experiencing trauma. I was about 6 or 7, I believe, choking my mom, strangling her, and she was in the room barricaded. And I was the youngest of 5, so the older ones broke down the door, my brothers. And yeah, he was on top of my mom. He didn't have on any clothes, and he was choking her with one hand, and he smeared his excrement on her face with the other.
That's traumatic, man, to remember that type of stuff. And a lot of people don't realize that people have backstories. Crime doesn't happen in a vacuum, you know? And so Absolutely. That's why it's good for you to, share your story. And we really thank you for sharing such traumatic events, you know?
Oh, yeah, of course, man. Yeah, the more I go and I tell my story, man, it seems like it's getting some play, you know? So I feel cool about that, man. I say all that. So about that first time, right, I think that was the concept that entered my head, is like the concept of true hatred, because at that point I was only 6 or 7, you know, and I was the youngest, so I was, you know, I couldn't hang out with my brothers. They were too older, couldn't talk to mom or dad, so I was kind of isolated. So when that occurred, I remember being frozen and not being able to protect my mom or nothing. So it was as if the fear got me stuck. I was paralyzed completely, you know, and that was the moment where I understood where I hated fear. I hated that feeling in my heart. And it was the first time I really entertained that hardcore concept. Hatred was like a mother figure. She became like a figure, like someone I could count on that would help me be courageous, you know. And it was the first time she took my hand, and I really felt it inside of me. It was something I can't explain.
Believe the helplessness in that moment created a new, if you actually learn in brain science, a lot of traumatic events, a lot of studies have proven that trauma will create new neural pathways and essentially put you on a different path than where you would have gone. So what you're saying is that helplessness that you felt, the hate and whatnot, it might have put you down a pathway to where you ended up going, you know?
Absolutely, man, 100, because I remember the feeling, right? That feeling, which I hated it because I couldn't protect my mom, and she was my dude, you know what I'm saying? And it was that feeling was so intense that it became so real in my future that if somebody would try to put fear in me, that's what I would go back to, and I would fight it with every bit of my high psychology, by any means, you know what I mean? And it was as if I wanted to prove a point, because I would never again want to feel helpless like that again, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would make a statement in order for them to see that I'm not that guy. You know what I'm saying? And
I agree with you 100%, man. That's exactly the way that a lot of men feel. I grew up in a group home, in a foster home, but in one particular group home I was in, I was abused. And after that, it put me on a pathway where I wanted to be, I wanted to exude toughness. I wanted to be the toughest dude. I want to be the most violent dude. And only just to prove my masculinity and my, you know what I mean? Because of the trauma I suffered. So that's why I always say it. I constantly say it, man. I don't see criminals around me or prisoners. I actually just see broken men, because you could just pull up any one of them and just ask them, what has their life been like? And Victor, I swear, you know about this from being incarcerated, that most everybody, gang members, the most violent person, you pull them up and ask them about their childhood, they'll start tearing up. Yeah, they'll start tearing up. Like, show them just a little bit of compassion and understanding. And, you could be the hardest criminal, violent criminal, stabbing people, and all of a sudden they just going back to their childhood. It's just compelling,
You ain't kidding, bro. Like, the things I've seen in there, some are, just like you said, some of the most violent cats, man, they got these big hearts, and some are just grown men still trapped in children's heads. You know what I'm saying? It's it's tough, man. It's tough to live with trauma, especially after all the years in there. You come out here and you've trained your brain to think a certain way inside of there to respond, and that don't go out here, So you feel like you're, on another planet than most people,
Wow.
It's just about assimilation, I guess,
so when was your first stint in juvenile institutions?
Okay. So at the age of 10, I was already a street kid. At 12 was my first time. I was 12 years old. I was still in alcohol, and alcohol to me was like my saving grace in my head, because as soon as I got drunk at the age of 10 was the first time I felt that numbness, that all the chaos, everything, all the stress, the depression, anxiety, was just vanished. You know what I'm saying?
Melts away.
Right. Absolutely, 100. And so at the age of 12, I was already walking in there with Cortez and sagging my pants and big jackets, and I would stick a 12-pack inside of my jacket and just head out. And one day they caught me, and that was my first taste of JDH, juvenile detention hall. Yeah.
Wow. Did something remind you, Linda, when he was talking?
Yeah, absolutely, because I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I completely understand that feeling.
Yeah, for sure. You know what's crazy is that same feeling that I got when I was 10 for the first time, where I actually gotten drunk. It was like the same thing I felt as soon as I got out, because when I got out here I accumulated about 20 years in. But when I got out, I remember feeling that same anxiety, that depression, because in prison there was no time to think about all the trauma I have been through, all the riots and the fights and the years of solitary confinement I spent. And as soon as I got out was my first time to actually feel my emotions and assess myself and psychoanalyze myself. And it was so intense. There was so much there that I haven't really come to terms with. So the alcohol was the first thing I did for the first year, and I couldn't escape it. And finally I said, that's enough.
I can understand 100% what you're talking about as well. When you're in the midst of prison, the chaos and the violence and the politics, it is so vicious to us. It's not like the guards are for us. So you're just like pressure on all sides. And then you add the indifference from your family, the alienation from your family. It's just like, goodness gracious, there's no outlet. The worst existence you can have in this country is to be a prisoner. You can't get any worse than that, period.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people undermine the emotional aspect of what it is to be completely abandoned and to be rejected by society, by your loved ones. It's almost a torture in itself, the significance that it carries to know that a mother doesn't see you no more, that a father doesn't see you, that family that you were close with, all these social groups that you were associated with are completely gone. And now, and exactly like you said, when it comes to the COs, if anything, there's somebody else that you got to be careful for, because they can put you in a precarious situation, So there's never rest. it's always go, 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 you know? And it gets tiresome, you know? It definitely does, man.
Yeah, it does. And you hit the nail on the head, because in my relationships with my family, I mean, for the first, 18 years of my incarceration, I think I seen my siblings one time, and I think my older brother maybe 2 times, and I just got to the point where I was feeling so hurt by the alienation and the indifference to my suffering that I had to distance myself from this, you know, because if I just put it on my terms now, I disown that relationship, I'm done with that relationship, that puts me in a better mental space, because no longer do they rent space in my head, because I don't expect that no more, you know?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, just talking to you there and what you're going through, right, just brings me back to where exactly I was, and I remember that now, bit for bit, that hopelessness. For me, too, that was another thing with trauma, is that when somebody hurt me, say they left, when, you know, a brother or somebody I loved died and I was in prison, and my go-to ever since I was 6 years old was to feel more hatred, was to be colder, was to entertain this concept of anger and grab onto it for dear life, because without hatred, I was afraid of that. Feelings and emotions, you can't have those in there. It was almost like I have to, completely detach myself from all that, you know what I mean? From being human. And I did that for so long that my heart, that my mind, and my soul just became so dried out and cold, you know? And in coming out, it was so hard to assimilate with other people who felt these emotions and who hadn't seen the things I've seen, or who hadn't been abandoned or rejected, you know? But it takes a lot to get back, but it is there. It can happen, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I got confidence that when I get out of here, man, I'm fighting for my release as well, and I'm confident that my mind is in such a solid place. I turn down every drug, you know, and I'm able to, you know, I don't get into violence, I don't gamble, you know. Obviously, if somebody starts assaulting me or something, I'm going to defend myself. Right. But as far as I'm not putting myself in situations no more. So I know what you're talking about, man.
That is awesome. No, that says a lot about a person, man, because in there, the whole prison is pretty much doing all the things that you said, you know what I'm saying? And it seems like for a person to make those choices inside of there is, that's the environment of the prison, you know? And you always got those lifer homeboys who are on another term where they're tired of doing the violence and they're tired of doing the drugs and the gambling and all that, you know? Those were the cats that I kind of started getting close to, you know? And it was tough, man, but hey, I'm here now, I guess.
You said in your earlier statement that you had done how many years altogether, around 20 years incarcerated?
Yeah, I did 20, so I did 2 years at 14 years old. I robbed a store. We were doing a beer run. I took out a knife on the guy, and I tried to stab the clerk. And it was a situation where my father had just beaten my mother, and I was super upset, got in a fight with my dad, and I wanted an outlet to take that out, so went and I robbed a store when I was 14 years old, and I ended up getting 2 years on that approximately. I was out for maybe about a year, you know, same hood, same stuff I went home to. At 18, I caught another 2 years selling drugs. I was out maybe 3 months, 4 months, and ended up catching a murder. And I went in at 20 years old, and it was it was a heinous crime, man.
Can you share with the audience, if you would like or not? It's up to you. What happened?
Okay. Yeah, for sure, man. I got you. So I was selling drugs again as soon as I got out, man. I couldn't read. I had no school because I had dropped out when I was a kid, 4th or 5th grade. Going to school, I couldn't do it. There was too much trauma at home. I was more concentrated on eating, finding food or whatnot. So all this came to like a boiling point, man, at the age of 20. And I was selling drugs, and one of my good friends I hadn't seen in a long time stopped by, seen me, and I guess he was doing meth or something like that, and he was plotting to rob me, and I found out. He was on my phone. He used my phone to make some calls, and I caught him on my phone. And it was a situation where it started off with a beating. We held him there for a few hours, dragged him outside, dragged him from my room to the living room, and my cousin shot him in the head, execution style. That said, what happened next was kind of gruesome, man. Yeah, we carried him into my bathtub, and at that point, I remember, man, everything that was going on. It's so weird because an event like that, you don't forget nothing. You remember the shirt he was wearing, I remember feeling this outer body experience. It was so strange. It was like my soul coming out of my body and seeing me doing the things that we were doing. And we ended up grabbing a set of knives, and my cousin, it became to detach the guy. I was selling a lot of drugs, so I had a lot of connects, and we ended up taking him to a farm. And in the farm there was pigs, you know, there was some animals there, and he had told us that for a fee that he'd get rid of it. So we gave him some money or whatnot, and so we sent my cousin out to another state, and he was going through a lot of trauma, you know, drinking a lot, and he ended up telling my aunt and my cousin what had happened. And as soon as he told them, one of my cousins called the cops, and they came and arrested him. They arrested me, and there was another female there that exposed the farm guys, and then the farm guys turned on me and my cousin. So at that point, I was pretty much screwed, and I was facing life sentence, and my cousin was facing the death penalty. Well, we both were. And the only thing that saved me, is horrific as it sounds, is since my cousin had shot him, they weren't trying to give him no love. But because I was just there at the point of where all that occurred, you know, I didn't actually shoot the guy. So when they ended up doing their search, it took them about a year to find him. And when they found him at the farm, I didn't actually think that they were going to find him anymore because I thought that he was gone. Turns out there was a barrel at his ranch, and it was inside of a hole, and they ended up finding it inside of the hole, but they only found parts of it. So because they only found parts of him, the family wanted some closure and wanted to know where the other pieces were. So under a deal, me and my cousin had talked it out, and under a deal, they would max me out at 189 months, and that would be the max. And no matter what they found or whatever, there was nothing they could get after that except those 189 months. That was my deal. Yeah. And me and my cousin took him out to the lake that we left it at, and we showed him where the rest of him was. And my cousin ended up getting 25. I got 189. And then my cousin ended up getting another, I want to say, 17 years in prison on top of the 25, like for other situations that occurred inside of prison, you know, like the violence that was in prison. And
let me ask you, Victor, do you think that if this man would have been able to follow through on his robbery attempt, that the roles could have been reversed, that he could have actually murdered you?
There was no doubt, man. So what was crazy about the whole situation is that when he was, man, this is hard to talk about. So when he was in the bathtub, right, and we hear this knock at the door, and we had assumed it was the cops. And we had assumed it was the cops and that they were coming because they heard the gunshot. And so we're checking out the windows and stuff and grabbing our pieces, you know, we weren't sure what was going to happen. But I ended up looking through the peephole, and there was 3 masked men outside of the door. And later on, it wasn't until months inside of county jail that I found out that he was plotting to, that the guys there, he had called him, and his objective was to get us drunk, and he pretended to be drinking. And his objective was to get us drunk and open the door when we were drunk and passed out, you know what I mean? And they all had guns, and all these guys had guns, so it was a setup. And it was so it was kind of hurtful, man, because I was about to give him a lot of money just on GP, just for, you know, I seen he was down and out, and I wanted to help him out. And years later, man, it's sad. The whole thing is sad. Now I don't feel some sort of way about it or nothing. I just feel like it's so tragic, man, how, you know, everybody there that night, like, lost their life in one way, you know what I'm saying? And it was just a horrific incident, man, and there's no words to express it, man, because that was one aspect, and then the psychological aspect of having to confront their mom in court, you know what I mean, and hearing all the things. Yeah. He was a childhood friend. So when I was 12 and sleeping on the streets, this was one of the things that I was seeing in my head when I was there is when he was a kid, I was sleeping on the streets and it was a cold night out, man, and I would drink beer in order to get drunk enough to pass out because it was so cold. And without beer, I couldn't pass out. So this guy, he would go into his house and sneak out like a blanket, and he would sneak me out some food and give me some food. Of course, I wouldn't eat the food because food would stop my drunk, you know what I mean? But it was the intention for sure, and that's one of the things that I remembered, like a flashback I had at the moment this stuff occurred, you know what I mean? And it was so weird because it was like vivid. Yeah. It was vivid. It was just crazy, you know?
Yeah, like I told you before we started the podcast, how our stories are so similar, it's ridiculous. I mean, I literally grew up on the streets. I had people bringing me blankets so that I could sleep in newspaper bins and stolen cars and, you know, in the basements of people's houses and doorways. And that life is so sad, you know? And one of these street kids that I grew up with also tried to bully me and rob me, and I pulled out my gun to protect myself and shot at him, and he ended up going and calling the cops on me, and I just assaulted him out of nowhere. And, you know, my mind is not fully mature, so I'm like, I ain't bad, I'm just going to accept whatever. I ended up taking an alpha plea for this assault when in reality I was defending myself, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. So I could have easily have murdered him, you know what I'm saying? But it didn't go that way, but it sounds so similar to the story. And that crime of that assault on this guy that was not even a crime, it was a self-defense. I was just trying to repel this dude from trying to rob me, right? Ended up becoming the reason why they doubled my sentence on this crime. So that I got a de facto death sentence, basically a slow death sentence of 32 years because of this prior offense. You know what I mean? And so I can 100% see like what you're going through. My actual offense now on this one was a drug deal dispute between me and a drug dealer, and this guy was taking a hit of crack, and next thing you know, we're arguing over the money I just gave him, and a gun was produced, and that turned into a robbery, armed robbery, and no one was even hurt, Victor, and they gave me a death sentence. You know the trauma that I've inflicted upon anybody in my life is nothing compared to the trauma the state has inflicted upon me. How many stabbings I've seen, how many times I've been where people's brains are being kicked in, you know, the level of disproportionality of these sentences. I genuinely believe that when they give a sentence, they should actually express every level of trauma that is about to be inflicted upon our people when they go to prison. That they're going to be surrounded by extreme violence. They're going to be desensitized to stabbings, assaults. They're going to have hits perhaps done on them, or they're going to have to do hits on others. You know, like all these levels of depravity that our people are going to suffer when they go to prison should be in the judgment and sentence.
Wow.
You know?
Hey, man, what you're saying right now, right? Yeah, for sure, man. I feel you. And you know what? And how do we express this, right, when you come out? Because look, when I came out, my family would see me as weird. Like I seen a fight the other day, and they were spooked, you know. And me, I'm kind of just walking by it like it's nothing, you know. It's just two homeless guys fighting, right? But in comparison to, like you say, where I've literally seen people get their faces stomped in, like, you know what I'm saying? Like people like killed, you know what I'm saying? And I grew so cold because of it, but because I had to. Psychologically, it wasn't a choice, you know what I mean? I had to survive. And coming back out has proven very hard, but you know what? I'm doing it, you know what I mean? And I'm understanding through love, through compassion, these things.
Yeah, and you know what? Everybody at Defund DOC in the community want to tell you, Victor, man, how proud we are of you because, you know, it's not easy to get out of here lacking education, lacking any kind of save nest egg. I mean, they steal your wealth, your labor the entire time that you were sentenced. I mean, you get out, how much debt did you have when you got out? You know what I mean?
Man.
It's just every card is stacked against you, yet you're out there. I know that you got your podcast now, and just, man, we're really proud of you, man. I'm proud of you, man. You know, I'm right there with you, man, and someday I hope
brother.
You know,
awesome.
I hope to prove to the world that the super predator false narrative they had out there, the career criminal demonization that they did, it was the most evil thing that you could have done to our people because, you know, people actually believe that's a thing when it's not. There's no such thing,
hurtful,
you know?
Man. So hurtful, bro. Hey, when's your date?
Currently I still got like almost 15 years left. I'm in my 40s, so I don't know if I'm going to make it. Both my parents died before the age of 60, and my release date's when I'll be like 59. So we're currently trying to fight for clemency. Yeah, we're trying to fight for clemency and resentencing to find, you know, hopefully one of these good-natured people that are in power will find mercy, you know, but... we never know, But that's your story. It just pops the narrative. And me and Linda, that's like one of our main things, right? Is to break stereotypes, to pop those false narratives that. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that listening to your story from childhood to your incarceration and everything that happened, it sounds like you were stuck in survival mode from the time you were a child until your incarceration. Like you were just stuck in survival mode.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what's crazy about it, right, is here I had entertained this concept of coming home and be like, I'm going to be finally home, but home isn't a place without an individual that accepts you, that really loves you, and it was so hard, like, to find somebody that would under the situation, you know what I mean? And it was crazy because I had thought about this for years. I was like, okay, finally, when I get there, I can finally get a chance to go through all my emotions, and finally this whole thing will be over. But I had to come out, and it was very difficult. Like, I didn't know how to use an iPhone. Technology was, like, just insane to me. It was so crazy. It's like the world evolved like 100 years, And finding a job, you do these applications, and not like you used to. You actually just do them on the internet from your home. And I didn't know how to send an email. I didn't know any of that, And it was all the process that makes you feel extremely incompetent. Even though I went to college and school, I did all that, but we didn't have access to so many things,
Well, when you're incarcerated, it's like your life is standing still, but the world out here continues moving. So,
absolutely.
You're in there for so long, and it feels like it's standing still, and you get out here, and it's like a whole new world.
Absolutely, yeah. Everything changed. Even the folks out here have changed. There's so much heartache and pain out here. I see so many homeless, but what's weird is that I got this compassion for the homeless, for these guys who are out here struggling. Like, here I feed the homeless a lot, so I'm in a program right now where I actually do that. And it's been the one thing that's given me some meaning, to give back to people that were traumatized like me. Like, it's easy for a lot of these people to say, look, there's a homeless bum, he should be out there working or whatnot. But they don't understand the first thing about, like, walking out in that guy's shoes, you know what I mean? The torture, the pain, if you're going to get that lost in order to escape your reality, there's got to be some dark stuff there,
Wow.
And,
that's pretty compelling, the kindness that you're expressing. And, the politicians that are this hard on crime, all this rhetoric that demonizes our people, they wouldn't even want to admit that people like you was able to be rehabilitated and turn his life around, and now is feeding the homeless in his city, and now is an asset to the people. People change. People are not the worst of their bad decisions, Like, anybody that has never made a bad decision, then let them be the ones that cast the first stone. Because I don't know anybody in my life that I've ever met in my whole existence that hasn't made bad decisions. You know what I mean? And the way that they turn what the people do into a way to enslave them, to incarcerate them for long prison sentences, it's just repulsive,
No, what's crazy, man, is that out here it seems like love is taken for granted, but when you come from a place like us where you were deprived and rejected and abandoned, and like that concept of love was so far-fetched, almost a myth at times. So when you come out here and you have the opportunity again, given everything that happened in the past, so many people we've seen, die, and the violence and all that, right? And, like, getting the opportunity to express your love for somebody else is, like, the most precious thing, and it's absolutely cherished. You know what I'm saying? The compassion.
Yeah, and you're not even talking from a prison cell. You're literally talking from the streets and showing that love is an action. You know what I mean? Like, you're showing that, hey, I'm not the same person. I aged out of crime, and they've actually proved that our people age out of crime. The actual brain science says the age of 26 is when the brain is becoming fully mature. And a lot of us committed our crimes before the age of 26. All my offenses have happened before the age of 26. And yet the state is murdering me. You know what I mean? And this is happening to our people across the whole country,
Absolutely.
And
That age thing that you're talking about, right? So it was so odd, man, because I stopped going to the hole around the age of 28, 29, where my brain was already starting to come up. You know what I mean? Where it it was done. Your frontal cortex is fully grown, you know. But it was kind of crazy that that's exactly at the age where I started to think, you know, like with logic, you know, that's opposed to emotions, you know.
You had told me that you spent approximately 4.5 years in solitary confinement during your time in prison. So can you describe to us how that experience affected your mental health and perspective on life?
Oh yeah, for sure. Solitary confinement it's a torture chamber. It's a torture chamber. It's almost like you're buried alive. It's almost like you know of things that are happening. People are dying out there, your family or whatever. Like your daughter's hurting, your son is hurting, but you can't stop it. You can no longer interact with the world. You can't express it to nobody. So all you are is like a source of energy, you know? And there's times, and in solitary is where all the dirt happens, so you see people smearing feces on themselves, people peeing themselves, people slicing their wrists with their own nails.
The mental health.
Yeah, the mental health. And yeah, exactly. And it's like most of the people in prison actually have that, right? It's like they're ill. And
I'd say almost every single person.
Absolutely, hands down. That's an accurate statement, man. Because for people like us who can think, okay, right, we still got plenty of trauma that makes us ill, you know. But it's
I was just gonna say, just to add what you were saying, man. I swear, when I did almost 5 years in solitary confinement, and I literally couldn't even get up to brush my teeth sometimes. The depression, the just loneliness, you know, just the sheer hopelessness that you feel in that existence. It's just like, oh my gosh,
it's insane.
It is palpable.
There were times where, and I'll say this, man, and, you know, I don't admit this very often, man, but there were times where I was determined to hang it up. And I kid you not, I didn't have the energy to make my string from my underwear, from my drawers. You know what I'm saying? Like when you make that string, you put it in the vent. I didn't have the energy. I couldn't move, like physically. It was so damaging. And sometimes I would be so lost in there that I would be afraid, like my mind would go so crazy sometimes that I would be afraid that I'm not sure, like I wasn't sure if I was going to make it back to sanity or even what sanity was, because there's nothing to relate it to anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true, man. And how did you get any auditory hallucinations? Because after some years of solitary, I started like really getting out there, man, and listening. I would swear to hear this. A lot of people laugh at it, but it's a real thing. This really happened to me, man. I started hearing the Brady Bunch song inside the vent.
That is the trick.
The Brady Bunch, and I was like, "Am I hearing this? Like
is this right?" For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I think honestly, between us, Victor, I think that I just wanted some social connection with the world so badly that my mind went back to my childhood, because I remember always watching the Brady Bunch as a child.
Man,
and it just came through the vent, bro. And I think that's what happened, you know?
I believe it wholeheartedly, man. There was this time where I made some pruno in there, and I had to save my fruits over and over every single day, and I was saving it. And I cleaned up, and I got dressed as if I was going out somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, I got dressed, I washed myself up, you know, washed my clothes super nice, and I made my pruno. I turned on my headphones, and I remember closing my eyes and pretending that I was in like some kind of dance club or something. You know what I mean? And the females and the guys are hanging out, and everybody's laughing. But it was a form of insanity. You know what I'm saying? But that's what I longed for so bad, like that socialization. You know, just people in general. You know. And intense stories, man, for sure. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, defund DOC that's like one of the main things that we want to like really make a dent in, is like abolishing solitary confinement. That practice is like, we understand, like, we're reasonable people. If there's an emergency, like if somebody's stabbing people or fighting people, you know, like separate them for a moment, and you know, I mean, we can understand that. But when you're locking up people for years for, you know, introduction of, you know, some marijuana or something, like this is a real thing. This is what they're doing, you know, and that's outrageous to us, you know. Absolutely.
And it's such a waste of taxpayer money, man, that could be used for so many other things.
Yeah, I know. That's what. You know? That's our thing, is like defund DOC and refund the taxpayer, because they failed at that. they failed at their stated goal because they one of their trainings is like the more infractions that you write, the safer you're making the community, and it's just complete false. They literally go around trying to harass people, infract them over and over because they're being trained that every time they infract you, they're perhaps keeping you in prison and saving the community, when in actuality, they're failing. 87% of people getting out are reoffending because of the trauma of being oppressed and harassed. So, yeah, it's just so funny the way that they're, starting to be proven wrong and the real villains in the story,
Man, wholeheartedly agree, bro. Like the interaction between staff and an inmate is laughable, man, because it's always
us versus them. Yeah, it's us versus them. They create this hostility.
Oh, absolutely. And what really irks like a situation, like a cat inside that situation, is the fact that there's never accountability for what they do. So they can get away with anything, even murder, and still be good. They're unionized. And the inmate with no voice, with no money on his books, without nothing to his name, the only thing he has is his violence and his anger. And it's like that's the only thing that most folks express, and it's like there's a reason behind that, you know what I'm saying? And it's not normal, man. It's not good for nobody. Because when people come out like that and they're all traumatized, and some cats are out here, they're out here doing drugs and all these crazy stuff, but they're still trying to escape the beast, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of this is just trauma from prison, man, where you make people even worse than they were,
Yeah, our literal stated mission is a grassroots effort to reform the system so that it's basically modeled after the way that they're running the prison system in Norway, where they treat the people like human beings. They actually allow them to get jobs in the community. Can you imagine that?
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah. What's so weird about that, right, is that, like, most people hear that and, like, they hate it. But I believe wholeheartedly that compassion is always the way. That's the only way, man, to fix what is completely broken. You know what I'm saying? The Norway thing is awesome.
You treat them like hate. When you treat them with hate, they're going to reciprocate hate. You treat them with love, they're going to show love. And I feel like that's what's missing in this system. It's so heartless. It's so lacking any kind of love. And, like, the way to keep connected to your family and your friends is so lacking. Like, if we were in Norway, Linda could be coming in here and living with me inside the prison, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's the way to create strong social networks so that you don't recidivate, not alienate them from society, embrace them and make them a part of society so that they're actually, functioning members of society before they even release. They already have a job. They're already married. They perhaps even have kids. They have a house already ready to go. That's how you keep people from coming to prison,
Yeah, the system seems to serve to traumatize people who are already traumatized and make it way worse situation. You know what I'm saying? Just
100%.
Yeah.
And the masses of Americans, a lot of Americans are starting to come to realize that, because they know somebody that's locked up, they know somebody that's been released, and they know, hey, like, you were calling him a career criminal. You were calling him a demon. Like you were demonizing him in the courtroom. But here he is sitting next to me on the couch watching a movie. You know what I'm saying? Like he made a bad decision, but he doesn't deserve a slow death sentence. He didn't deserve a long prison sentence where they're killing you, over these offenses. And people are starting to realize that. They have firsthand experience with somebody that would have been declared a super predator or a career criminal or whatever all these dehumanizing names are,
Hey, do you know anything about James Arbolino?
No, who's that?
He's a psychologist. So the stories about, like, your brain developing or whatnot?
Yeah.
He's one of the creators of that. And I got a really cool chance to talk to him the other day. Interview him.
Well, maybe you could give us a introduction, man, so we can get him on the show because it sounds like that's in line. That's in line with what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's exactly my objective as well. Exactly that. And bringing him on the show, he explained the psychological aspects. I mean, just to a T, and it was amazing to have him on. He was such a cool dude, man. So much like love and compassion from this guy, you know, and he's somebody that the judges even fear because as soon as he enters the courtroom, like they know they got a war, you know. So
yeah, we would appreciate an introduction for that because I think that's one of the main things that, you know, majority of the people that are incarcerated were incarcerated before the age of 25. Before the age of 26 is actually the age where I started, like most everybody in here, they've been incarcerated since they were young, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's like the worst. There's this thing called ACE where if you've experienced all 10 of the questions, you're like 1 in 1,000, right? And the majority of people experience like 2 or 3 of the traumatic events. Guys like me and you, we probably experience all 10, which makes us 1 out of 1,000 people who have actually experienced that kind of trauma. You know what I mean? And,
yeah, so let me ask you this then. If these college-educated people are knowing all this stuff, right, they know that to end recidivism, you need to educate people to treat their root causes, and you know that they know this stuff. Why are they – it almost feels like they're bullying the working class, the poor class, the people that that are enduring this trauma, and giving them long prison sentences, even though they know that they could solve this stuff like overnight by just starting robust treatment and education. Why are they not?
See, what's crazy, Daniel, is that there's a lot of prisons right now that are for profit. So, and they give money to these politicians in order for these things to be held up. You know what I mean? For their money. Like inmates, it's just a number, you know, like they feed their bankroll, you know, and the state money goes to them. And it's one of the things that is wrenching, man, because there's no logic in what they do. You put people inside of prison, they all fight, they all get screwed up, and then you release them. What the fuck is that about? You know what I'm saying? It's crazy, man.
Yeah, I know. That's one of the main things that me and Linda always talk about. It's like they are it's like a reverse incentive. So their incentive is not public safety. Their incentive is not to ensure that new victims are not victimized upon release of these people. Their incentive is to incarcerate you so that they can take your labor. That's literally an incentive. Food factory, one of the main industries inside prison in Washington, they made $180-something million last year doing food factory, selling Meals on Wheels and all these different food products. And yeah, it only took $33 million to incarcerate everybody at Airway Heights. So you see what I'm saying? Like it's crazy. That's what it is, and you hit the nail on the head. It's for profit.
It's for profit, man. These last 2 years here in Oregon, like the amount of people dying in prison has started to grow. You know, like a lot. And they're trying to explain that it was for COVID, and I was like, bullshit. I was just there, bro. You know. A lot of it is that the cops don't care about you. Like the nurses, they don't care about you. So you're not going to get help when you really need it. And because of that, a lot of people die, you know. The stabbings and, you know, stuff like that. And I don't know, man. This whole thing is just upsetting. It's unnerving. But it gives me the juice, man, to wake up and to want to do another interview, you know what I mean? I'm going to New York, bro, and I'm going to do a podcast with Ian Bick, and he's pretty big, you know. He's got a lot of followers, man, so I'm going to be in front of a lot of people telling my story, and I'm a bit shaky about it, but I'm going to do it. It has to be done, you know. So it's going to be cool, man. I'm hoping. I've never flown, you know what I'm saying? I'm nervous.
With everything that you've gone through, all of your struggles, what would you say to someone that is in the middle of facing similar struggles to what you've gone through or just entering the prison system? Don't detach yourself from the concept of love, man. The concept of love, because once it dies, it's so hard to come back from it, you know. Just that concept is healing power. It's like there's healing power in it, and it can seem in there that the situation is hopeless, but there is hope. Once you come out, or even if you don't come out, just the fact that you got love in your heart, and it makes life worth existing. You know what I mean? Just exactly that compassion, that love. That's the only thing I can find any truth in, you know? But yeah.
So let me, before we close, I like to get one little prison story from you.
Yeah.
Give the audience, man, one of the experiences that you've seen of violence inside prison to just, reveal the deep violence that is just surrounding the American people that are incarcerated.
So a few blocks from us was this place, was a studio. And inside of the studio in 04, this guy called another inmate up there. I guess he had owed him money. It was after a visit. And he knew that, he had swallowed something from the visit. He thought he did. They took him up there. They beat him up. Long story short, they took off his pants, cut him from the anus to the jugular, and went through his intestines and trying to find the drugs. And there ended up being no drugs. And they put him inside a trash can, his body inside of a trash can. And that was, I think, the most gruesome story. And there's a lot more, brains scattered on the cell, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Those are the common ones.
That is exactly why I like to share those stories, because now here we are. Those scarcities that are inside prison is what actually propels that violence. And that's another story of just, how the administration is the one that they're in control of all this stuff, like the ability for, our people to be having visits and whatnot, and then, people get so mired in their own trauma that they need an escape with drugs, but, they
absolutely,
it's just sad. It's very sad.
Hey, Daniel, man,
awesome.
Thank you guys for having me, man, and I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Hey, friends, another episode is over. We want to keep improving this podcast, so we need your suggestions for future episodes. Also, as you know, I have been in prison almost 20 years, so if you have any questions about the criminal justice system, feel free to ask, and I will try to answer it. Please email your suggestions or questions on our website. Do you have a social media community that you can share our posts with? Please join our social media platforms and share our posts. That really helps. Also, I know you are busy, but taking one moment to do a review would help us tremendously. Thank you all.
Start the long and forgotten, threw away the key. Gone and forgotten, they forgot about me. Long and forgotten, threw away the key. Gone and forgotten, defund the OC. If I was you, I'd be asking for a refund. Everything they do for DOC, they need to defund. Lazy guards, double cells, everything in here is hell. You ever been to the county jail praying that you get some mail? Then you hit receiving all the stories, can't believe them. I thank God that I'm alive, I thank God that I'm still breathing. After COVID, wearing masks, everyone's sad. How did a virus know a budget? It really makes me laugh. We had good times, bad times, but still it made us strong. It was hard to be accountable, I had to right my wrongs. But now I'm long and forgotten, they forgot about me.